After the First World War, the French wanted to make sure that their eastern border would not be overrun by yet another attack from German lands. And what is a famous way of keeping invaders out? Build a wall. So build a wall they did. I'm Indy Neidell, and this is a World War II on-location special. After World War I, the French were determined to never again have a war on open ground in their own territory. So the idea was to stop the enemy at the border. A variety of plans to fortify the Franco-German border are born already during the Great War, and plans are discussed more or less immediately after the 1918 armistice. Already during the early 1920s, increased fortifications on select points along the border are under construction. By 1925, the idea of a coordinated line of physical defense works has matured into a project to create a literal wall of fortifications along the whole line of the German border. It is these fortifications directly west of Germany, right here behind me, that have gone into history as the Maginot Line, named after the French Minister of War, André Maginot, who presides over the project starting in 1928. In reality, though, the Maginot Line is much more than that, because it denotes a series of fortifications running south to north from the Alpine border with Italy all the way to the English Channel. But as we shall see, the complexity of building such a series of fortifications is not just an engineering feat of some magnitude, but a political, foreign relations, and financial challenge too. Hazards that will leave this grand project full of gaps large enough for the entire Wehrmacht to slip through into France in a matter of days in May 1940. Contrary to popular belief, these gaps are not in the fortifications themselves, though, but I'll get back to that in a bit. The knee-jerk reaction immediately after the war to make sure Germany will not cross the border again is the occupation of the Rhineland as per the Treaty of Versailles. But this arrangement will end in 1935, and until then, another solution is needed. In 1922, the CDT, the Committee for Territorial Defense, is called together, first under leadership of Joseph Joffre, retired general and former chief of staff of the French Army, and then, starting in 1925, by General Adolphe Guillemot, commander of the Allied occupation forces in the Rhineland. The master plan that evolves hinges on the idea that the enemy must be slowed down or even halted right behind the border long enough for full mobilization and deployment of the French. So it is not the defense works that are the end plan. The principle that they eventually agree on is that the war will only be won by the maneuverability of the army and the advance attack on the adversary. So, again, contrary to popular belief, it is not the case that the French strategists are stuck with the idea of a Great War-style stagnant front. And they learned from captured German World War I fortifications that a strong defensive perimeter can slow down the enemy significantly to give time for that counterattack.
The basic plan of the Maginot Line was to resist 20 days, to avoid a blitz attack coming from Germany or Italy, and to oblige the enemy coming through Belgium, because the French wanted the help of the British army, and we wanted to pass through Belgium to enter into the Ruhr in Germany.
See, that's very interesting that you say that it was designed to hold them for 20 days.
20 days.
Because a lot of people think, oh, it was designed to be an impregnable wall that nobody could break through. CDT's first practical step is an extensive survey of the French eastern borders north of the Alps to assess what is needed. They start putting together a mixed plan for defense works based on the terrain, tactical considerations, distance to the German border, and technical possibilities. As Mussolini rises to power, they increase the area to include the border all the way down to the Mediterranean, Corsica, and French Tunisia in North Africa. In 1925, after 3 years of work, they've settled on an extensive strategic plan. Although they do weigh the possibility of relying on the Benelux countries and Switzerland as bulwarks and debate how a defense in those areas might affect relations with those neighbors, in the end, they decided that the construction plan must include those borders too. However, here they also assume that the French army, and probably Allied Britain, will enter into those countries and stall an attack before it hits the line. Moreover, the Franco-Belgian border is more navigable than the forests, steep hills, and mountains further south. They conclude that a counterattack in this area will be easier and can be done by greater force. Moreover, the firing lines there are more open, so a casemate, bunker, or fort in that area can cover much more ground than in the choppier terrain of the Ardennes, stretching down into Lorraine and Alsace. The fairly easy to defend, relatively flat and open area of the Littoral and Lille sector will be based on field defenses, categorized as level 0 defenses. The Escaut and Maubeuge sectors are a major entry point from Belgium and will have the second highest defense level 2 and be protected by 4 ouvrages, or underground forts. The Ardennes sector will also depend on field defenses, as the terrain makes it practically impossible to cross with tanks or artillery at that point. This is, by the way, also not where the Germans come through in 1940, as that is, in fact, not possible. South of there is the Montmedy sector around Sedan and Monthermé. Although still in the Ardennes here, it is theoretically possible to cross, and the fortifications are again level 2, with 4 forts, 2 of them with heavy artillery capability. The Marville sector is planned with field fortifications and level 0 defense works because of terrain. The Cluny, Thionville, and Boulay sectors around Metz are planned with heavy level 3 defense works, as entry here through the southern tip of the Benelux countries and directly from Germany can be swift and sudden. No less than 33 fortifications of varying sizes will protect these sectors, the heaviest fortification of the line north of the Alps. 14 of these forts will have heavy artillery. The Falquemont and Saret sectors provide fairly good natural defenses and will be protected mainly by field defenses. Gaps in the natural defense will be blocked off by 6 forts. The Rohrbach, Vosges, and Hagenau sectors, also directly on the German border, will be fortified at level 3 with 10 forts, 7 of which will have heavy artillery. The 3 sectors on the natural mountainous border with Switzerland will depend on field defenses, while the entire Alpine border with Italy, down to the Mediterranean, will be level 3 and contain 53 fortifications, almost half of them with heavy artillery. Corsica and French Tunisia will be protected against a possible Italian invasion by a series of blockhouses and field defense works. In 1929, they're ready to go into construction. French Minister of War André Maginot presents the plans to Parliament and asks for 2.9 billion francs in appropriations for the project. His plan is approved with 90% of Parliament votes. Construction starts immediately in 1930. The construction takes place under extreme secrecy, with only French companies allowed to be contracted, and all workers have rigorous security and background checks. By 1933, 26,000 men are working on the sites. It is tough and dangerous work, with cave-ins, accidental explosions, and other mishaps killing dozens of workers over the years. They start by digging and mining their way into the rock to create the space they need for the underground constructions. Some of the blocks will reach 17 meters into the ground, have up to 3.5 meters, that's like 12 feet thick, walls, and require 30,000 cubic meters, like 1.1 million cubic feet, of super-strength armored concrete. In total, they will construct 46 major artillery fortresses, half of them north of the Alps. 97 infantry fortresses armed with anti-tank artillery and machine guns, 36 of them in the north. 342 casemates armed with mortars, machine guns, and anti-tank guns, 308 of those are in the north, as well as a number of observation posts and bunkers. The underground fortresses will have independent capacity to fire above ground through bunker slits and vertically extendable turrets, armed with a variety of guns from machine guns to 75 and 88 millimeter artillery. The artillery forts will have cannons between 75 and 135 millimeter caliber. Many of the gun positions will be exchangeable.
I'm right eye dominant. Okay. If I put my shoulders, my right eye's on it. It's Maginot Line. Everything's super technology. Watch. You undo this bolt, you turn this through 180 degrees. Now when I put my shoulders on, it's my left eye to the side.
In total, they construct 152 raisable revolving turrets that operate from deep under the ground.
We're in the lower level of block 2, and this is the mixed arm turret.
Right.
So what we're seeing, the weight of the turret is resting on this part here.
Right.
This is the counterbalance arm, and this is the counterweight in its pit.
Okay.
This is the balance point or fulcrum, and it simply takes 2 revolutions to lift the turret up or down. It only goes up or down about this much.
Okay.
Originally it was armed with 2 75mm artillery pieces.
Right.
They changed the armament to 2 armour mixed anti-tank gun with 2 machine guns, because this was to have 2 gros ouvrages, 1 on each side. So if we now go up, running through what we've got here. Left-right traverse is 2 men turning the handles.
Right.
He can change it with a bit like a clutch mechanism, from fast to slow, rapid to lent.
Yes.
Now, it's missing, but previously he could turn a handle for fine-tuning of the rotation of the turret. To give orders, this weapon system sat in this cradle with the gunner beneath it. So he's got 2 control arms to move left and right, up and down, because the end of the barrel is in the ball mounting here.
Sure.
So the 2 gun systems fire independently. In between, we've got the housing for the periscope that came out and looked in the middle.
Yep.
The 2 holes here are for spent ammunition.
Okay.
There was a tube that came out the back of the weapon system that was nearly vertical and dropped down, so all the spent ammunition went down, because they didn't want any gas for it.
I got you. That's wow. Pretty tight system. Dozens of factories are at work constructing the complicated parts for the turrets, or putting turrets from World War I back into working condition. They use steel that has been specially developed to withstand modern warfare. In fact, it will turn out that the heavy armor can withstand direct grenade hits even by an 88mm grenade shell coming in at a 90-degree angle. The fortresses will operate in groups of 3 to 5 that are interconnected by tunnels, walkways, and crawlways. Some of them will even have narrow-gauge railways. What we really wanted to do was give you an idea of the massive scale of this, of how large this really is. I mean, even from one end of here to the other, that's over a kilometer that you have to walk or roll or something, right?
Oh, when we do the complete tour of the Fort Schönenburg, you walk 3 kilometers.
That's just a tour of this fort.
This fort.
There are many forts. So.
All the galleries in the Maginot Line, it's a total of 100 kilometers underground galleries.
Die waren alle verbunden mit Telefonkabeln, wie man so sagt. Und es gab aber auch schon damals die TSF, der Telefon sans fil, wie man sagt. Das war ohne Kabel, aber das war alles mit Kabel verbunden. Diese beiden Motoren, die sollten damals Strom erzeugen. Das waren die Stromerzeuger vom Werk. Aber die Maginot-Linie, jeder Bunker von der Maginot-Linie, der war ja versorgt vom Hauptnetz mit einem großen Kabel. Ja. Und diese Motoren, die sind ja bloß im Fall eines Falles. Das waren im Notfall, konnte man diese Motoren. Also hier befinden wir uns im Filterraum, denn als sie damals die Maginot-Linie gebaut haben, haben sie ja immer noch die Psychose von den Gasen von 14, 18 gehabt noch. Und deswegen haben sie auch in jeder Bunker, aber je nach Größe, eine Menge Filter eingebaut. Kohle und gerade Filter. Und mehr war es nicht. Das Problem aber, wie damals war, weil falls ein Grasangriff gekommen wäre, hier, man hatte damals die Bunker nie hermetisch schließen können. An der Türe, die Skischächte, die waren ja nicht dicht. Und deswegen hat man innen drin einen kleinen Überdruck von 300 Millibar entstehen lassen, um die Luft, die eindringende Luft wieder abzudrücken.
Between the forts, the casemates and bunkers will be set up in patterns so they cover the entire defensive perimeter that they protect. Entry to the forts and casemates will be limited to one door, protected by armored doors, moats, and guard posts that can even operate in close combat from inside. But there will also be emergency exits for worst-case scenarios. Okay, if there was great danger, and as a last resort, you might find yourself right here. What's this?
This is the secret emergency exit.
Yep.
And only the commandant of the fortress had the key.
So you couldn't just go out yourself?
No, it's not possible. We are 30 meters deep, 100 feet. And at that place, from outside, we are hidden in the forest.
Well, it's cool that you've got a back door, you know, a secret back door.
You can enter. It's impressive.
It is? Okay. Okay, now this doesn't look like somewhere you'd exit from. So how does it work?
It works. We have here a tube.
Yeah?
The tube is 22 meters high.
Yeah?
It's filled with gravel and sand.
Okay.
And if you have to go out, from outside here, you climb at a level, you open a mechanism, the gravel falls in this room.
Yeah?
It frees a ladder.
Okay.
Here, and you can climb, outside.
And they cannot follow you. I mean,
No.
you're...
I hope it. But from the tube, you have 22 meters free.
Yeah, but if you've got to run away and somebody's following you, then this is where you want to go. Contrary to the German West Wall, that will rely on depth to act as an impact zone to slow down the enemy, the Maginot Line is truly a single line running some 6 to 16 kilometers behind the border, 25 kilometers at its deepest point. In front of it are minor bunkers and outlook posts that are only expected to act as a first point of contact so that the line can activate.
The mission was to resist 20 days.
Right.
And you have two light lines of the Maginot Line from the border, and the fortress Schönenbourg and the other big fortress in Casemate are the main resistance line.
Okay.
And when you pass that, you pass.
For that to work, this means that the forts and casemates have to be manned constantly. The forts are practically little villages underground.
Its stores hold thousands of tons of frozen meat and 500 million gallons of red wine.
Okay, so where are we now? This is obviously a barrack of some sort. Yes?
Yeah, it's a sleeping room for 36 soldiers.
36 people in this size room.
12, 12, 12.
Wow.
And they are obliged to stay here during 3 days. It's 1/4 of the soldiers.
Yeah.
3 of the soldiers are in the combat blocks, 1 kilometer from here, and 1 is here. And every 3 days they change.
Okay.
And they stay
Whoa.
here for 300 days.
Yeah, that's When the men are rotated out of their frontline positions, they're housed further back from the front, at first in regular barracks. In 1933, though, when Hitler seizes power, the increased threat level pushes the government to ask for an additional 1.3 billion francs to build bunkers several kilometers behind the line to house enough soldiers in shelters for constant manning of the line. Despite all this money and manpower, it is at times not enough to complete all the plan.
La Ferté originally was meant to be 3 blocks. It's all Maginot equipment, but they ran out of money and so it wasn't constructed as it should be. There is no separation of function. This is a combat area. It's a cloche. It fires. That's where the men sleep. There are 50 men in this block. There's no separation between the men sleeping, living down below, protected, and the combat area where the fighting is. So when there were the explosive charges dropped down from the cloche above, the explosive charges destroyed this wall. This hole, this gaping hole where there should have been a wall with the concrete on the floor, this is not a structural wall. This wall is only here to keep this part in overpressure, so that any gases are pushed out. So when there were explosions here, this wall just disintegrated, and in fact you can see how it must have injured some of the men lying on the beds, and straight away there were explosions, there's fire, because the fuel required for the motors was just stacked all over the place, because there was no place to store it underground. So it just went catastrophically wrong in seconds or minutes.
Now, the Germans couldn't have known that this one wasn't. So it was just luck that they picked it.
It was kind of bad luck. Yeah.
Okay.
The Germans didn't know, no.
When Germany's rearmament seems an inevitable fact, in 1935, Maurice Gamelin, then Minister of War, pushes through a major improvement of the line. He uses the now extended 2-year mandatory military service to have the army start improvement works and extensions. He sets aside 5,000 conscripts to construct 4,400 new bunkers to fill out the line with stronger fortified infantry positions to give mobile armored divisions the support they need to attack through the line. Out of these bunkers, 3,300 are built north of the Alps, with the highest concentration in the areas with level 0 to 2 defenses. This is where the problems start, though. Instead of carrying through on that plan by supplying the needed forces, the French army generals start quibbling about who gets what, fail to implement a functioning armored division command structure, and set up plans that at times seem to completely ignore the existence of their formidable, extensive, and very expensive defense line. In some places, the works ordered by Gamelin are only carried out at a slower than required pace. One of these places is critical. It's the line at Sedan, and the man in charge there is General Charles Hunziger, who you see more of in our May 18th, 1940 double-length episode. Well, okay, other episodes too. Then we will also see if the line holds, and if it does, what other things go wrong. This episode was made possible by special donations from our community. This enabled us to go to France and film on location, so thank you very much to all who contributed. To do this again in the future, we will need your long-term participation as well, so do not forget to join the TimeGhost Army on Patreon. See you next time.